Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a tale so oddly specific, so casually unhinged. You'll wonder whether it's myth, metaphor, or just something Zeus came up with after too many ambrosia shots. You're on Mount Olympus, of course. The clouds are unusually puffy. The air smells faintly of ozone and burnt olive. A breeze carries whispers from below, mortals arguing over whose goat is uglier. And the gods, they're unusually quiet today. That's when you see him, Zeus, king of the gods. Lightning bolt enthusiast. Beard always on point. He's standing at the edge of the cloud like a man who's just Googled how to fake your own death without raising suspicion. His gaze is downward, not in judgment, not even in irritation, just tired curiosity. You inch closer, he mutters, "Maybe I need perspective." And then with all the casual weight of someone ordering a strange but harmless drink at a bar, he adds, "Yes, ants." You blink. He doesn't. This is the moment the world shifts, not with thunder or prophecy, but with a single whimsical thought. A king of gods pondering the life of an insect. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now, because I promise this is going to get weird. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're still on Olympus. You're seated on a gently oscillating cloud legs, dangling off the edge like it's a porch swing. Around you, the usual celestial noise is muffled. No harp practice, no Dionysian party echoes, not even the chorus of minor gods bickering over who borrowed whose trident. The silence is unsettling. Then again, Zeus's mood sets the forecast. And today the sky god is pensive. His throne sits empty silver, imposing, slightly scorched from a recent lightning accident, and instead he's been standing for hours barefoot on the cloud surface, staring down at Earth like it owes him an apology. You've seen this before. It's usually the prelude to smiting or new calendar months, but this time there's no thunder, just that mutter, "I need perspective." He stretches, yawns, and without looking at you says, "You ever notice how ants don't seem to care?" You wait for a punchline. None comes. Zeus, it turns out, has been watching a group of ants construct a nest beneath the columns of the Temple of Hera. Every day, same thing. Ants, moving grains of sand, hauling crumbs 5 times their size. No complaints, no audience, just relentless tiny purpose. "I envy that," he says. No bureaucracy, no ambrosia taxes, just task and motion. You want to ask what this has to do with immortality or being worshipped or owning a literal lightning arsenal, but you don't. Because when a god starts romanticizing insects, you just nod and keep your eyebrows steady. Then he says something even stranger. "They remind me of the myrmidons. You remember the myth. Long ago, when an island called Aegina was wiped of people by plague, Zeus repopulated it by turning ants into humans, warriors of unmatched discipline. Achilles would later command them in the Trojan War. Maybe Zeus says it's time I walked the dirt again." Now historians still argue whether this moment was a philosophical experiment or an early god-sized midlife crisis. One scroll suggests he just wanted a vacation, another a tantrum in response to Athena winning at chess. But regardless of motive, the moment is real. Zeus walks to the edge of Olympus, lifts one golden toe and sighs. "I'll need to change form, of course," he murmurs. You brace for a bolt of light, a swirling vortex, or at least a glowing rune. Instead, he pulls a weathered scroll from beneath his toga, squints, and mutters incantations, like someone assembling IKEA furniture without the manual. The wind dies, the clouds stop moving, and somewhere far below, a dog howls. You know that sound. It's the universe preparing for absurdity. And all you can do is sit back, sip your nectar, and watch as the King of Gods begins a transformation no one could have predicted, and one humanity definitely wasn't ready for. You wake the next morning to the sound of celestial paper shuffling, a grating rhythm of scrolls being unrolled, divine seals being snapped open, and the occasional cuss whispered in ancient Cretan. It's Olympus HR, and the Q is out the door, literally. It's draped down a cloud, coiling around columns like an extremely bureaucratic snake. You rub your eyes and join the line. Zeus, despite being king of the gods, insists on reviewing all divine complaints personally every few millennia. Keeps me grounded, he once said, which is hilarious considering his favorite chair floats 5 feet off the floor and emits thunder when reclined. Today's complaints are as gloriously petty as ever. Apollo has filed for horse chariot damage compensation. Again, apparently Helios borrowed it without permission and cooked it into orbit. You read the scroll. There are diagrams. There's a sunburned Pegasus. Demeter wants a raise in seasonal allowance. Spring isn't springing like it used to. Poseidon, of course, wants bigger waves and keeps quoting nautical poetry as justification. Meanwhile, you're assigned to catalog these gripes, which means listening to minor river gods argue about moss zoning and jotting down Artemis's handwritten post-it notes, all of which are passive-aggressively floral-scented. But even amidst this usual divine noise, something's off. Zeus hasn't taken his throne today. He's not pacing, not smiting, not sneakily meddling in local elections. Instead, he's slumped over a celestial drafting table, hunched like a mortal accountant. The scroll in front of him is titled Contingency Rituals for Perspective Acquisition. Underline 3 times. You try not to stare, but he's scribbling diagrams, some of ants, some of himself, and one that appears to be both. The caption says, Vision 47,000 eyes 0 ego. You clear your throat. He waves you away. Too many opinions up here, he mumbles. Too much attention. I need simplicity. Mortality you offer, he snorts. Please. I said simplicity, not absurdity. Zeus walks to the open terrace and gestures downward. They keep going, he says. The mortals, despite everything, plagues, empires, taxes, look at them, carrying bread crusts and raising children like it's not a cosmic joke. You squint. Below, a mother is trying to shepherd 2 kids through a bustling agora while carrying a goat, 5 olives, and a broken urn. It's impressive. She didn't even drop the goat, Zeus whispers. That's resilience. You want to remind him that he once turned a man into a stag for forgetting to close a temple door, but now doesn't feel like the time. Instead, he turns to you and announces, I've decided. I shall walk among them. You blink, in disguise. Of course, he says, not as myself. They'd panic. They'd build another temple. I'm not in the mood for statues this week. Bird, bull, swan again. He shudders. No, something quieter, something humble. You brace for something philosophical. He grins. Ants, you do not react, because if you react, this becomes real. He elaborates. Think about it. They build, they carry, they obey. No temples, no poems, just purpose. Now quirky scholars often speculate that divine beings suffer from attention fatigue, that after millennia of worship one might crave a day without an ode. It's not an accepted theory, of course, but still, the idea of Zeus willingly vanishing into insect obscurity, fringe yet oddly plausible. And what if something goes wrong, you ask? Zeus shrugs. Worst case, I get stepped on. Best case, I learn something. He claps his hands and a bolt of light sears across the sky. You expect lightning. Instead, a scroll floats down into his hand, marked in gold leaf, Self-Reduction Protocol, Entomological Format V1.3. You made this already, you ask. He looks sheepish. Drafted it after watching that documentary on termite queens. You shake your head. And the rest of the gods needn't know, he says, except Hermes. I'll need someone to carry my sandals while I'm small. The gods, of course, are not easily deceived. They'll notice, eventually. But for now, Zeus seems calm, centered, determined. He gathers his scrolls, his sandals, and a comically oversized spyglass for on-the-ground observation. Then he turns to you with an oddly wistful smile. "Take care of Olympus," he says, "and feed my eagle." He gets grumpy. You want to stop him. But it's already happening. The clouds dim, the wind hushes, and in a flurry of golden sparks and celestial dust, Zeus the Storm King, the bearded thunderer, the ogler of mortal affairs, vanishes. All that remains is a faint buzzing hum. You look over the balcony. Far below, on a crumbling temple step, a single ant pauses mid-scuttle. It raises one leg and salutes. At first, Olympus doesn't notice. That's the funny thing about divine politics. You'd think the sudden disappearance of the king of the gods would trigger alarms, omens, or at least an emergency poetry slam. But no, the bureaucracy churns on. Athena is busy hosting a symposium on rhetorical ethics. Hera's organizing her 4th wedding anniversary to the same man, and Dionysus has been napping in a wine barrel since Wednesday. Meanwhile, you're stuck holding Zeus's eagle-sitting schedule and a vague sense of cosmic dread. But down below, everything's shifting. You follow the action through the divine telescope, one of those enchanted tubes that hovers mid-air and smells faintly of rosemary. At first you see nothing unusual, just Athens, early afternoon, the usual blend of dust sandals, olive carts, and arguments about Plato. And then there, on a marble ledge, an ant. One ant standing a little straighter than the rest, antennae twitching with regal confusion. That's Zeus, or at least it's part of him. You see, he didn't just become an ant, he became a swarm, about 47,000 ants, to be precise, each one pulsing with a flicker of his essence. Not a god inhabiting an insect body. No, this is more distributed, more experimental. The transformation wasn't clean, either. The spell, self-authored, remember, is based on Homeric poetry, mixed with Etruscan bug rituals, which is, frankly, a bold move. The result? Fragments of divine consciousness scattered like pollen in an afternoon breeze. He's all of them. He's none of them. He's a god-shaped hive mind. Now, historians still argue whether this was a deliberate design or just magical clumsiness. There's a surviving tablet in Delphi that describes Zeus, many-legged and small, which some interpret as evidence. Others think it's just a badly translated beetle myth. Regardless, the effect is real. You lean closer to the lens. The swarm begins to move. And oh, what a mess. Some ants immediately start building. Others try to climb a nearby statue of Athena. One simply rolls in a patch of honey for 10 minutes straight. Coordination, not great. You imagine this is what Zeus feels like every time the mortal world declares a new festival in his name without asking first. Back on Olympus, a few minor gods begin to get suspicious. Apollo, peeking through the sun's reflection like it's a divine ring, light raises an eyebrow. "Why is the king's aura twitching?" he mutters. You fake a cough. "Probably just molting. Seasonal stuff." He shrugs and resumes polishing his lyre. But you're glued to the lens, watching as Zeus in ant form attempts to organize himself. Slowly, the ants begin clustering, moving with more purpose. They swarm across the stone floor in tight spirals, forming sigils that shimmer faintly with residual thunder, and then, like a sleepy orchestra finding its rhythm, they begin to harmonize. Zeus is remembering who he is. Now ants don't think in the way gods or mortals do. Their instincts dominate, forage, defend, build, repeat. So imagine trying to play Beethoven with 47,000 vuvuzelas. That's roughly how difficult it is for Zeus to assert control. But eventually, the ants fall into a pattern, a hierarchy. The Zeus core, you assume resides in the central cluster, the ones perched atop a broken fig, issuing minute orders through pheromonal Morse code. It's oddly elegant. He's watching humanity now, not from above but below, from between sandals and sandals, from the cracks in marble, from the shadows of fruit stands, and what he sees is messy. Lovers arguing over figs, orators flubbing speeches, a playwright loudly insisting his comedy about talking onions deserves divine funding. You almost feel bad for him. Zeus, who once ruled storms and decided the fates of empires, now dodges falling coins and rogue sandals like a six-legged tourist in his own kingdom. Then comes the rain. It starts as a drizzle, barely there, but for an ant, that's an apocalypse. The swarm panics. Coordination shatters. Half the ants flee under a cracked amphora. A brave few form a raft out of olive leaves. One brave soul, likely Zeus, attempts to channel lightning and zaps a tomato. You wince. Still, it's a learning moment. The king of the gods, now soggy and microscopic, learns that survival doesn't always come with grandeur. Sometimes it's just about finding dry ground and hanging on. And for the first time in eons, he experiences genuine fear, not the theatrical kind, but the real trembling, what the Hades is that snail doing here kind of fear. It's humbling. Later that evening, as the rain fades and the agora bustles again, you spot the swarm regrouping behind a merchant stall. Zeus is quiet now, observant, grounded in every possible way. He's seeing what he wanted to see. And you just hope he doesn't step on himself. By now, the ants are beginning to walk in rhythm, not perfect, not military, but certainly less chaotic than their initial thunderclap entrance into the mortal realm. You watch from Olympus, cradling the telescope like it's a cup of warm tea. And yes, you're worried. Not for Earth, oddly enough, but for Zeus's dignity. Then Hermes shows up. You hear the winged sandals before you see him, an airy whistle, the rustle of ankle feathers, and then a voice behind you, like someone narrating their own wardrobe change. So he says, drawing out the word like a curtain, did our glorious Thunder Dad actually go through with it? You nod without taking your eyes off the swarm below. Hermes squints, follows your gaze, and lets out a low, impressed whistle. Ants. I had swamp nymph in the betting pool. Guess I owe Hephaestus 5 drachma. He floats beside you, munching something that might be a fig or might be a slightly burnt moon biscuit. All right, he says between bites. What's the over-under on how long he lasts down there? 3 days, you reply without hesitation, optimist. He grins, and then below things get complicated. Zeus in swarm form has meandered his way into a plaza, where a street philosopher is mid-rant. This guy's got a beard big enough to hide a seagull and a scroll in each hand. His current argument, the gods are clearly metaphors, and possibly drunk ones at that. Zeus, not one to take slander lightly, even while exoskeletal sends a splinter fraction of the swarm to climb the man's leg. Now here's where things go full theater. The philosopher, upon realizing he is being steadily anted upon, begins flailing like he's invented a new form of interpretive dance. He screams about divine punishment, curses the ant god, and accidentally tears his own tunic in half. The crowd applauds. They think it's performance art. Historians still argue whether this moment gave rise to an actual ant worship cult, or whether it was just an Athens fad like sandal charms and philosophical speed dating. Regardless, Zeus is delighted. You can feel it through the telescope, tiny vibrations of smugness. But Hermes is frowning. You know what this means, he says. If he gets too into this, he might not want to come back. You nod. It's happened before. The swan phase lasted 3 weeks longer than intended. The golden shower episode still gets whispered about in bad poetry circles. Hermes sighs. All right, I'll keep tabs. He vanishes in a blink of sandals and citrus. Down below, Zeus is still riding the high of his ant-induced drama debut. The swarm scatters again, this time toward the agora, where market stalls overflow with dates, pottery, and arguments. One of the ants finds a bit of saffron, another a drop of honey. Two start sparring with matchsticks. It's chaos, but structured chaos, like a symphony composed entirely of squeaky doors and bird whistles. And then, in the shadows of a fig vendor's stand, Zeus meets someone unexpected. A child, barefoot nose, runny eyes wide. She sees the ants. She doesn't scream, she doesn't stomp, she just watches. And then she begins to talk, not in words you understand, but in soft, rhythmic sounds like lullabies hummed through cracked teeth. The ants pause, they cluster, they listen. You adjust the telescope. She's not just a child. There's something in her gaze, oldness, maybe, like she's seen gods blink and mountains shrug. Or maybe she's just got a really intense stare. Either way, she picks up a twig and draws a spiral in the dust. The ants respond. They begin to trace the spiral over and over, expanding it, decorating it with leaves and seeds and bits of broken shell. Zeus is fascinated. And here's the thing, ants don't do this. Not naturally. Spirals aren't in their repertoire. But this is communication. Zeus, for the first time since descending into exoskeleton life, follows, not commands, not orchestrates, follows. He watches as the child sits beside her spiral and hums. No crowd, no priest, no glory, just connection. Now fringe scholars, the kind who wear 3 scarves at once and name their cats after forgotten deities, claim that this child was actually a dormant oracle, one of the rare ones who speaks not with prophecy, but with presence. Mainstream historians dismiss this, of course, calling it folklore mixed with insect confusion. But the ants remember. Zeus remembers. And from your perch above the clouds, you watch the storm god inch toward something he never expected to find on Earth. Stillness. Evening creeps across Athens with a kind of sleepy golden slowness, the kind that stretches shadows and softens arguments. The market noise dwindles to background clatter. Amphora lids are secured. Stray cats assume their watchposts atop worn stone pillars. And somewhere beneath a merchant cart that smells faintly of leeks and regret, Zeus the swarm is hatching a plan. He's been quiet since the spiral. You can feel it in the way the ants move, more purposeful now, more unified. The chaotic zigzagging has turned into calculated zigzagging, which for Zeus is essentially growth. You shift your gaze through the telescope and catch a glimpse of something unusual. A parchment. A full-size, mortal-scale parchment being slowly dragged across a dusty alley by approximately 80 ants. On it, a charcoal sketch of a very muscular thundercloud, wearing what might be a crown and holding a lightning bolt like a baguette. This is unmistakably Zeus's first attempt at ant journaling. Now you might laugh, but let's be clear. This isn't the weirdest record-keeping method the gods have used. Historians have documented everything from fire-writing salamanders to that one-time Poseidon encoded naval law into whale song. So ants making cloud-themed fan art, hardly the strangest entry in divine archives. Hermes returning with what appears to be a meat pie and a deeply skeptical look hovers beside you. He's journaling now. He asks, mouth half full, "What's next? Self-help leaflets for beetles?" You shrug. At least he's not declaring war. Hermes taps his sandal thoughtfully. That you know of. Below Zeus is organizing. No, really. Organizing. A delegation of his ant selves has begun recruiting. Other insects, flies, beetles, even a particularly smug mantis are being drawn into what seems to be a sort of ground-level symposium. There's a podium, a large beat, there's seating buttons and nutshells, and there's Zeus, or at least the ant representing his executive function, trying to explain democracy using bits of string and crumbs. It's noble. It's also a train wreck, because spoiler alert, insects don't care about voting systems. They care about food survival and occasionally biting things that look at them funny. And this is where Zeus runs face first into reality. See, gods, especially ones as old and story-thick as Zeus, aren't great at not being in control. But here among antennae and pheromone trails and evolutionary instincts sharper than most knives' control is not on the menu. The flies ignore him entirely. The beetles roll their eyes. Yes, beetles can do that. It's unsettling. And the mantis eats the podium. Zeus tries to rally. He starts emitting what he thinks are leadership chemicals, only to accidentally trigger a panic response, causing half the insects to scatter and one to lay eggs. You can almost hear him sigh. Now historians debate the implications of this scene. One school argues that Zeus was genuinely trying to found a new civilization, an Antopolis, as one overly dramatic scroll calls it. Another school claims it was performance art gone rogue. A third group suggests he was simply bored and avoiding a scheduled divine audit. No one really knows. But this much is clear: Zeus is learning humility. He's discovering that ants, despite their order and purpose, aren't blank slates. They're not vessels for divine intervention. They're ants, which means they're busy doing ant things, and no amount of thunderous charisma is going to override a colony's focus on finding a grape skin to drag back to the nest. And so that night Zeus wanders, alone as much as a swarm can be. He creeps through alleyways, across temple steps, under sleeping dogs, and through cracked amphoras. He passes unnoticed, unseen, just another flicker of life in a city brimming with it. And here's the strange thing, he's starting to like it. The silence, the smallness, the lack of expectation. No one bows, no one petitions, no one asks for rain or revenge or relationship advice. He's just a speck among specks, and it's oddly peaceful. Later, beneath the moon's sleepy watch, the swarm gathers near a candlelit home where a family shares a modest meal. Laughter spills through the windows. A song, old and off-key, rises into the air. Zeus pauses. There's no altar here, no statue, no offering, just warmth, just life. And for the first time in a very long time, he doesn't feel like a god. He feels like part of something. You'd think being a swarm of ants would prevent introspection. You'd be wrong. Zeus, the whole buzzing, crawling, clickety mass of him, is having a full-blown existential awakening under a broken amphora behind a bakery. The smell of warm barley bread lingers in the air like a lullaby, and for once nobody's screaming his name, building a temple, or sacrificing a goat in his general honor. And yet, despite the peace he's pacing, or rather hundreds of his ant bodies are doing synchronized laps around a fig seed. It's the closest thing to pacing he's got in this form, and it's deeply unsettling to the nearby insect population. Why ants again? That's the question echoing through the collective ant headspace. He could have been a breeze or a squirrel, or even a philosophical potter with a mysterious past. But no, he chose ants. You remember the moment vividly. I want to understand purpose, he'd said. Real purpose. Not the kind carved into stone or woven into prophecies. He'd looked down from Olympus and seen ants dragging pebbles twice their size, working in silence, never complaining, never demanding praise. They don't need worship, he'd whispered. They just do. And that hit him hard. Because for a being like Zeus, whose name has been carved into mountains and whispered through centuries, the idea of doing without being seen is almost heretical. But now here he is, living it, feeling it, fumbling through the dirt like a tiny thunder-powered janitor. Historians still argue whether this was a punishment in disguise or an experiment gone too far. A few suspect that Hera, in a moment of passive-aggressive genius, swapped a rune in his transformation spell. Others believe it was a subconscious choice, a god seeking to shrink himself after centuries of omnipotence bloat. Whatever the case, the results are in. Zeus is, for lack of a better word, immersed. And then something happens that throws everything into question. A cricket approaches, not just any cricket. This one has a chunk of old papyrus stuck to its back like a backpack, and a glint in its many-faceted eyes. It clicks once, twice, then speaks, sort of. The sound is rhythmic, patterned. It's not language exactly, but it feels deliberate, and the ants, to their credit, pause. Listen, adjust their antennae. The cricket shifts, then impossibly it draws a symbol in the dirt, a spiral, the same one the girl drew earlier. Zeus's whole swarm goes still. It's a sign, a connection, a message. You lean into the divine telescope so hard, your forehead hits the lens. Because this is not supposed to happen. Insects don't communicate cross-species like this. Crickets don't doodle spirals, and certainly not prophetic spirals. Hermes, appearing beside you like a towel at a spa, stares down. That's new, he mutters. Did he invent a religion? You whisper, or uncover one. The cricket continues hopping in a tight circle, then pausing like a living punctuation mark. And that's when Zeus does something utterly unexpected. He bows, as an ant, which in practical terms means his leading ant, let's call it Zeus, Prime, lowers its front legs and dips its head into the dust. The rest of the swarm follows. Thousands of tiny gestures of reverence pointed not toward Olympus, not toward some ancient temple, but to a cricket with a parchment shell and a sense of rhythm. And you suddenly realize Zeus isn't pretending to be an ant anymore. He is one. In thoughts, in instincts, in allegiance. This isn't a god visiting ants. This is a god becoming one. Now fringe scholars, because of course they have opinions, call this moment the crisis of divinity. They say that by fully inhabiting the ant experience, Zeus risked forgetting himself, losing his essence in a million legs and mandibles. Others say this was the point all along, ego death through antenna. Whatever the truth, this moment marks a shift. Zeus no longer commands. He asks. He follows the cricket. Together they lead the ants in a slow, deliberate procession out of the alley and into the moonlit streets of Athens. You watch as the swarm curves around olive pits, dips beneath doorways, and pauses at crossroads. It's not random. It's a ritual, a pilgrimage. The cricket is leading, Zeus is trailing, and behind him something new is forming, a following. Ants from other colonies begin joining, one by one, then tens, then hundreds, drawn by the spiral, drawn by something. You sense it. So does Hermes. He says, oh no, he's building a theology. You glance over. Hermes is holding a makeshift pamphlet hot off a mortal printing press. The title, The Thunder Below, a New Order for the Crawling Kind. Zeus is writing scripture now, of course he is. The next morning Athens wakes to find itself slightly more itchy than usual. Not metaphorically, literally. Ants everywhere. They're not swarming exactly. There's no apocalyptic black tide of insect fury, but they are present in quiet corners, along statues nestled into sandals, crawling in perfectly spaced lines across tabletops and amphora lids, and they all seem to be humming the same silent tune. Zeus's movement, let's not call it a cult just yet, has arrived. You watch from Olympus as the ants complete what can only be described as a symbolic formation dance on the roof of the Odeon, a massive spiral interwoven with 3 lightning bolt patterns. One scribe claims it was a message from the gods. Another claims it's just ants being weird. The debate lasts 2 generations. But down below, the effect is immediate. People notice. They whisper. The baker who dropped honey on the ants 3 nights ago now leaves out sugar on purpose. A street performer claims an ant bit his toe and cured his laryngitis. A temple priest discovers a trail of ants forming a perfect map to a lost scroll. And in the center of it all is Zeus, or more precisely, his prime body still distinguishable by the faint glow around its thorax and its tendency to pause dramatically before walking. Now remember, Zeus was never meant to be small. This is a god whose primary emotional settings are thunderous indignation and flirtatious conquest. Humility is not in the standard operating manual, and yet you see it. He's changed. He's listening now, and even stranger, he's learning. The ants teach him patience. They don't hurry. They don't gloat. They don't hold grudges. When something collapses, they rebuild. When something dies, they carry it gently back to the soil. And somewhere between grain hauling and communal cleaning, Zeus finds a kind of clarity that divine omnipotence never gave him. You feel it too. A shift in Olympus. The other gods are starting to notice. Not just Hermes, who is now actively chronicling the creeping reign of the thunderbug, but also Athena, who mutters something about emergent intelligence, and Aphrodite, who insists the ants are forming heart shapes purely to mess with her. Hera remains suspiciously silent, but the mortals, oh the mortals, are fascinated. Street artists begin chalking spirals along temple steps. Children leave breadcrumbs as offerings, arranging them in curiously mathematical shapes. A man in a tattered robe sits on a hilltop and announces, "The ground speaks now," before being politely escorted to the nearest olive grove. Historians later call this era the low worship period, not because faith declined, but because it shifted. From the heavens to the ground, from booming sky fathers to crawling wisdom beneath the feet. One particularly bold oracle even dares to say, perhaps the gods have been too loud. Maybe the lesson is in the quiet. That quote gets her banned from 3 festivals and promoted to head priestess within a month. Meanwhile, Zeus, deep in his swarm body, has taken up what can only be described as a hobby. He's building, not temples, not statues, not even metaphorical constructs. He's building bridges, tiny ones, between cracks, over gutters, from leaf to leaf, bridges that no one but ants will ever use. And yet, every stone is placed with reverence. There's something symbolic about it, maybe even penitent, because here's the thing. You've realized, watching from your cloud-bound perch, Zeus has spent eternity above mortals, above gods, above consequences, and now here in the dirt, he's choosing to connect instead. There's a moment you see it through the telescope where a young girl kneels beside one of these bridges. She doesn't speak. She doesn't disturb. She just watches the ants cross it. Then she adds a pebble to the side, a gesture of respect. Participation. The ants pause. One nudges her finger, and then they continue. That night, as stars freckle the sky and Olympus glows with its usual insufferable ego, something strange happens. A dream spreads. It's subtle, quiet, but everywhere. Mortal and immortal alike dream of spirals, of being small, of carrying something weightless and ancient across vast distances, of walking not toward glory but toward understanding. Even Hera flinches in her sleep. And in the center of the dream, curled among soil, sugar, and stories, is Zeus, silent, small, and utterly at peace. By midweek the rumors have names: the whispering crawl, the ground god, the thunder below. Even the fishmongers are gossiping about it, though in fairness, they'll gossip about anything that moves and isn't a fish. But this time, something's different. The stories aren't wild-eyed or frantic. They're curious, warm even. Did you hear the ants repaired my cartwheel? No, seriously, I left a cracked bowl outside overnight and it was sealed with, I don't know, resin and leaf bits, perfectly balanced. There's an ant that stares at me. I think he knows things. You back on Olympus are now fielding scrolls from mortal philosophers asking whether it's appropriate to write treatises in ant script. The answer is no, but the enthusiasm is impressive. And then the letters start, tiny ones, made of petal flakes and stitched spider silk, delivered not by Hermes but by ants. They show up at altars, window sills, inside togas, always signed with the same insignia, a spiral and a bolt. They're not messages in the human sense, but they contain meaning, patterns, ideas woven through texture and placement. People interpret them differently. Some hear songs, some claim recipes. One man becomes a dancer overnight after reading his. Historians will eventually argue that these were either the earliest examples of ant-based communication or a sign of collective mass hysteria brought on by overexposure to incense. Either way, it's working. Zeus is no longer just a swarm. He's becoming a myth again. But this time the myth isn't told in loud voices under torchlight. It's whispered hand to hand like a favorite lullaby. It's a god of patience, of stillness, of observation. The one who lives underfoot, carrying burdens without complaint and building quiet beauty from scraps. It's the first time in millennia Zeus has had a rebrand, and he's leaning into it. The swarm is now organized, not militarized. He learned his lesson with the myrmidons, but purposeful, almost meditative. They begin carving ant-sized runes into stone, little spiral sigils at the base of statues. No thunder, no demands, just gentle reminders we're here. We see you. Meanwhile, back in Olympus, things are getting tense. Hera's begun pacing. She claims she's not worried, but the way she's repolishing the same goblet for 3 straight days says otherwise. Athena is rereading the entire Iliad in reverse, looking for hidden bug allegories. Dionysus keeps offering people ambrosia-flavored ant snacks, and everyone hates it. And Hermes is enjoying himself far too much. He lounges beside you sipping something fizzy from a goblet shaped like a beetle and says, "You know, if this keeps going, we might have to start calling him Z-Ant." You throw a cushion at him, but the truth is there's real anxiety in the air, because God's real gods aren't supposed to disappear. They're supposed to thunder, to glow, to take up space in history like furniture in a sacred room, and Zeus has gone small, willingly. Now scholars from the fringe, and you know, the ones with their weird hats and long scrolls full of footnotes, suggest that what we're witnessing isn't just divine whimsy. It's evolution, not in the biological sense, in the mythic one. Gods adapt. They have to. Their power is tied to stories, and stories change. Once Zeus was the sky, then he was justice, then a metaphor for power, and now he's a lesson in subtlety, in presence, in humility. You shift your gaze back through the telescope. Down below, the ants are building something new, not a temple, not a monument, a path. Stone chips, petals, dirt, all arranged in a careful winding road that leads from the agora to a small cracked statue of a forgotten nymph near the outskirts of town. People begin walking it without knowing why. Some leave offerings, others just follow the curve and feel calmer by the end. A few start humming a tune that no one taught them. And at the front of the path, a single ant, Zeus Prime. He waits, not to be praised, not to be worshipped, just to witness. And for the first time in recorded myth, a god chooses not to speak. He just listens. So it was only a matter of time before Zeus, the ant-sworn god of the spiral, joined a colony. He doesn't crash into it thunderbolt first. He drifts in, quietly, respectfully, like someone trying to sneak into the back pew of a temple he didn't build. And the ants, they let him. No coronation, no holy chittering, just a subtle shift in behavior. Tunnels widen, work patterns adjust, space is made, no questions asked. You watching through the divine telescope with a fig in one hand and mild dread in the other, have a front-row seat to the weirdest identity crisis in celestial history. Now Zeus has had many roles: Sky Lord, philanderer, courtroom drama lead, but cooperative worker in a complex eusocial system, that's new. And oh, he commits. At dawn, he joins the foraging line, not leading, not commanding, just another thorax in the formation marching through dust to haul home a crust of barley flatbread. At midday, he helps expand a storage chamber. He moves soil, reinforces tunnel walls with spit-slickened plant fiber, even chews leaf pulp into soft insulation for the larvae. And at dusk, he guards the entrance antennae, alert, body poised, ready to fight if needed, not to defend himself, but to protect the whole. You blink, because that's not Zeus. That's something better. Now historians still debate whether this colony was particularly magical or whether Zeus's divine spark subtly elevated it. Either way, the ants aren't normal anymore. Their movements gain sync. Their architecture becomes symmetrical. They start leaving spiral symbols near entrances. And deep underground, in the cool dark of the brood chamber, something strange happens. The queen, massive, ancient, and fed by 1,000 mouths, acknowledges him, not with a speech or a command, just a touch. One brief ceremonial brush of antenna to antenna. It's permission. Zeus is now part of something larger than himself, and he loves it. It's ironic, of course. Zeus, the guy who spent centuries blasting things because his wine was too warm, is now willingly playing the long game. Contributing, building, serving, he even, brace yourself, waits. His turn in line. Hermes, who's now taken to narrating this whole affair like it's a reality show, mutters, if he starts labeling the pantry shelves, I'm staging an intervention, but you're not so sure, because this isn't just transformation, it's therapy. Zeus isn't pretending to be an ant anymore, he's thriving as one. Gone are the urges to control, to dominate, to fling mortals into cows or swans or high-stakes board games. Instead, there's clarity, peace, coexistence. He discovers that when ants work, they hum, not with voices, but with movement, rhythm, purpose. And Zeus, who once thought the only music worth listening to came from golden lyres and choirs of nymphs, realizes this humming is better, softer, truer. He starts to hum, too. Now remember that philosophers love patterns. They start noticing the ants more, observing, taking notes. A pattern emerges. Whenever Zeus is near, the colony's activity becomes poetic. Ants sort grains into the shape of constellations. Tunnels spiral out like Fibonacci dreams. Foraged crumbs are organized by flavor, not size. It's not random, it's art. And people notice. Soon, scholars are gathering by the colony entrance, listening, sketching, quoting the movement of ants as if it were scripture. One man, after observing an ant carry a sesame seed in a perfect figure 8, shaves his head and declares the beginning of a new philosophy, the path of the small. You roll your eyes, but even you have to admit there's something enchanting about it. Meanwhile, underground Zeus has a new role. He's been promoted. No ceremony, no hat, just responsibility. He guides younger ants, teaches them efficient carrying paths, helps rearrange a chamber to improve ventilation. He even intervenes when two worker ants argue over tunnel priority, gently nudging them apart and sharing a crumb of dried apricot as peace offering. And perhaps strangest of all, he doesn't miss Olympus, not once. He's tasted a different kind of divinity, one built not on thunder, but on trust, not on worship, but on worth. Because down here, no one cares who you were, only what you do. And what Zeus does now is simple. He helps. The colony wakes before the sun. It always does. And now so does Zeus. You find yourself watching his dawn ritual with an intimacy you never expected from a god. He stretches figuratively, not literally, since ants don't exactly have yoga flexibility, then checks the tunnel airflow, helps distribute the morning food bits, and gives the larvae chamber a once-over with what you can only describe as quiet pride. He is in every sense settled, but because this is Zeus, tranquility doesn't last. The morning's peace is interrupted when a new ant joins the colony. Nothing unusual at first glance, slightly smaller than average, moves with jittery energy, but then it starts making sounds. Click, chirr, click, click. It's not random, it's structured, a message. You zoom in through your telescope, and then you see it. This ant isn't normal. Her carapace glows faintly at the joints, her eyes shimmer violet in torchlight, and when she walks, the ground patterns shift under her steps. She's not a worker, she's not even mortal, she's an oracle. Or, well, the ant version of one. The colony freezes, the humming stops. Even Zeus hesitates. The oracle ant steps forward and makes a spiral in the dirt. Then she clicks. The thunder carries seeds. You feel a chill on Olympus. Hermes mutters, "That's either very deep or she's predicting the weather." But Zeus understands. He steps forward, they touch antennae. And in that second, just one heartbeat of divine exchange, you see it. A vision, not yours, his. You catch only glimpses, sand turning into golden grain cities, rising with spiral street layouts. Mortal and ant societies coexisting, bridges made of root and silk. And at the center of it all, not a temple, not a throne, but a small stone, plain, undisturbed, marked only by a spiral and bolt, a meeting place, a future. The oracle ant leads the way out of the colony. Zeus follows. They move together across the city, through alleys, up temple steps, past sleeping dogs and curious bakers. Behind them, a line begins to form. Not just ants now, beetles, crickets, mice. A sparrow hobbling slightly lands beside the group and chirps once. The animals are joining, not speaking, not marching, but walking with them, silently, like something ancient and forgotten has woken up and whispered, "Now is the time." People begin to notice, not in fear, in wonder. A little boy kneels and offers a grape to the swarm. A blind potter steps back as the animals pass and smiles. A priest in white robes drops his incense burner mid-chant and lets it roll, because the path is forming again. That spiral path from days ago, it's growing, expanding, stretching like a vine toward the Parthenon. And it's not just symbolic anymore. The stones along the road shimmer with dew, even in midday sun. Flowers grow along its edges. A dog with a limp steps onto it and walks evenly. A cracked amphora nearby mends itself just a little enough to hold water again. You whisper, "This is more than a journey." Hermes nods. It's a metamyth. And for once, he's serious. Zeus, still in swarm form, is stepping not into power, but into myth-making. He's reshaping his legacy not through lightning and law, but through dirt and movement. The oracle ant pauses outside a small shrine. She gestures with her antennae. Zeus pauses too. And then, with deliberate care, his swarm climbs the shrine wall, circles the top, and arranges itself into a massive spiral bolt. It glows faintly, even in sunlight. The people cheer, but it's not frenzied. It's reverent. A teacher kneels and draws the symbol in chalk on the ground. A musician composes a quiet flute melody, slow and winding. Children whisper stories about the god who became many. You realize something profound. Zeus is no longer a singular god. He's a shared one. He has splintered his ego across thousands of tiny lives, and in doing so made himself present in more places than he ever could as a distant sky king. And as night falls with torches lit and the city breathing slow, calm air, you realize he's not done. This isn't the end of a journey. It's the beginning of something no one, not even Olympus, was prepared for. By morning, Athens is different, not radically. There are still olives to sort, debts to argue about, and amphorae to break, in ironic celebration of avoiding breakage. But the atmosphere has shifted. It's in the pauses between market cries, in the way people glance down before they step in, how a humble spiral scratched into dirt now carries weight. Because now everyone knows about the ant god. They don't say Zeus, not outright. That name still belongs to thunder, to grand statues, and bigger-than-life morality plays. But the one who crawls the spiral. That's how the stories spread, whispered from baker to beggar, from mother to child. The myth is taking root not as royal decree, but as a folk truth. And you still perched in Olympus with your all-seeing telescope and a growing case of emotional whiplash, realize this is something the heavens have never seen before. Zeus is becoming beloved again, but not for his strength, not for his power, for his patience. The oracle ant is now a daily presence in the city. She doesn't speak often, but when she does, it's through patterns, torn leaves, arranged like prophecy crumbs placed to form questions. She pauses at crossroads, leaves messages in fruit stalls, even once arranges a line of petals that causes two feuding merchants to embrace with laughter. It's a new kind of worship, one rooted in observation, not offerings. Zeus, meanwhile, has not returned to Olympus, not even for his birthday thunder cake, which Hermes ate without guilt. Instead, he's immersed deeper into colony life. And the colony, it's evolving, not just in organization, but in scope. They've started building outwards. Tunnels now snake toward every corner of the city. Tiny bridges connect rooftops. Leaf-paved paths line sewer walls. The ants, under Zeus's subtle guidance, are laying the groundwork for something unprecedented. A city within a city, not parallel, not parasitic, complementary. People begin noticing patterns. Pots no longer crack when left near spiral markings. Lost objects return carried by unseen claws. Fewer rats, fewer infections, more peace. At first, it's coincidence. Then, it's blessing. And one afternoon, something astonishing happens. A woman, elderly, soft-spoken, nearly blind, approaches the center of the spiral road. She places her cane down, sits, waits. Nothing happens. Then the ants arrive. Not many, just a dozen. They circle her. One climbs onto her palm. She smiles, and when she stands, her limp is gone. You lean back from the telescope, not in shock exactly, more like wonder that no longer knows where the line is between miracle and metaphor. Hermes, drifting in upside down, chews a fig and says, "So, what's the plan if he never comes back?" You hesitate, because deep down you think he won't. Why would he? Here he's effective. He's appreciated not because of what he can do, but because of how he does it. No lightning bolts, no decrees, just helping. Quietly, constantly, and not just the city, the world begins to feel it. Seafarers report that ants now cluster on the tips of ships before storms warning of incoming weather. Farmers find spirals formed of sticks at the edge of their fields. Within a week, rain arrives. In Delphi, a priest collapses mid-ritual whispering of the thunder made humble. And in Sparta, the military sends a report that says only ants occupied the barracks. Drilled, left, morale improved. You can't make this stuff up. Well, you could, but you don't have to, because it's happening. Zeus, once the most visible god, is now the most felt, and the gods above, they're quiet. Even Hera hasn't stormed into your observatory in days. No lightning from her eyes, no icy judgment, just silence, reflection perhaps, or hesitation. Because the question now isn't how long Zeus will stay, it's whether anyone will be the same if he ever leaves. And as night stretches across the sky and the spiral glows faintly under starlight, you feel it again. That hum, that presence, not above, not beyond, but beneath. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real power has always been. The colony's tunnels are now intricate enough to rival any mortal blueprint. You trace them through the telescope, fine lines of living architecture, branching beneath Athens like veins beneath skin. They don't avoid the city's foundations. They weave into them, supporting cracked stone, diverting runoff, reinforcing sinkholes. It's not just clever, it's intentional. Zeus the builder, Zeus the patient planner, Zeus who once couldn't wait 5 minutes for a mortal to finish a prayer without interrupting with weather, now spends days helping reinforce a tunnel wall with chewed fig leaves and soil fibers. Above-ground stories bloom like wildflowers. A man claims his failing vineyard revived after finding a spiral of pebbles on the threshold. A group of children stops fighting when an ant formation draws a spiral between them. A sculptor whose hands once trembled now carves with precision after waking to find ants tracing his chisel in patterns all night. Athens is whispering. They don't say Zeus, not anymore, not out loud. Too sacred, too strange. But the spiral one, that name is spreading across the islands, across coasts. In Delos, a fisherman tells of an ant swarm that steered his boat through fog. In Ephesus, bees begin building spiral honeycombs. Scientists are baffled. In Crete, a man wakes to find the family olive press repaired, the ants dancing atop it like tiny engineers. You get the feeling that something is coming. And you're not the only one. Back on Olympus, things are tense. The throne room sits hollow more often than not. Apollo tunes his lyre quieter than usual. Hephaestus polishes the same gear over and over without looking up. Artemis has stopped hunting altogether. She just walks through the woods barefoot watching ants. Even Hera is still. You pass her on the balcony one evening. She's watching the earth arms, folded eyes, unreadable. You want to say something, anything, but she speaks first. He's happier, she murmurs. You blink. You're not angry. She shakes her head slowly. He was never built for ruling, not really. He just filled the space. You stand beside her in silence. She says almost to herself, maybe this is the first time he's choosing who to be. Then she turns and walks away, and you feel the weight of her words settle like dew on marble. Back on Earth, the ants begin something new. You don't understand it at first. It looks like a chaotic expansion, new tunnels, larger exits, above-ground structures made of layered silk pollen and crushed pigment. Then you see it, the shape, the pattern. They're building a library, not with scrolls, not with ink, but with memory. Each chamber holds objects, tiny ones, shards of pottery, flecks of spice, tiny bones arranged in shapes, symbols, smells, textures. They're encoding knowledge, sensory archives. Historians will argue for centuries about this moment, whether it marks the first non-human archiving system, whether it counts as writing or ritual. But one thing is clear. This is not just preservation, it's a gift. And at the center of it all, Zeus. He's no longer directing, no longer planning, he's simply being. He moves slowly now, deliberately. You see him pause before touching a leaf. You watch him let a younger ant pass first. You see him take the long way back to the colony just to pass a flower someone left in offering. And you realize something else. He's fading, not dying, but diffusing. His divine spark isn't bound in one body anymore. It's in all of them, shared, lightened, woven into the colony's rhythm like thread into cloth. He's letting go of Zeus and becoming something more, or maybe less, something truer. And as the moon rises, casting its soft silver light across Athens, you whisper to no one, he's not a king now, he's a story. And stories, they last. By now, Athens has quietly accepted the impossible. There's no decree, no public ceremony, no statue unveiling. But the shift is undeniable. You can feel it in the way people walk lighter, more deliberate. You can hear it in the market square where haggling has taken on a strangely poetic rhythm. You can even smell it. Bakeries are shaping loaves in soft spirals, and every fourth incense blend now claims to honor the silence beneath our feet. And beneath all of that, literally, Zeus is still present. Sort of. His essence has dispersed even further, like a drop of wine in an ocean. He's not just in the ants anymore. He's in the ecosystem of the colony. The soil remembers him. The fungus that lines the tunnel walls sings of him. Even the roots of olive trees lean slightly toward the spiral paths. It's becoming metaphysical. And the oracle ant, she's busy. She's mapping. You watch as she leads scouting teams to the city's edge. They leave trails of crushed mint and saffron. They mark stones with chalky residue that glows faintly under moonlight. They're planning something big, a movement maybe, and soon it begins. The ants start spreading outward, not like an invasion, more like pollination. A gentle flow of workers, each bearing a flake of story, a pinch of memory, a spiral carved in wax or bark or clay. They leave them in alleyways near wells tucked into cracks of library walls. People begin finding them, and something strange happens. They start responding, not with prayers, not with gold, but with stories, written in sand, traced on leaves, whispered at dusk. It's a conversation now. The gods of Olympus, once loud, once looming, have become less relevant. Still honored, yes, still respected, but in the quiet moments, in the moments where lives turn on kindness, timing, or silence, it's the spiral one who's remembered. And then comes the uprising, but not from mortals, from within. A small faction of ants, new, twitchy, more aggressive, breaks from the colony. They reject the spiral. They reject humility. They carve jagged lines instead, hard angles that point skyward. You recognize it immediately. Ambition. They begin hoarding food, blocking tunnels, building elevated platforms from seed husks. They want order, control, a return to hierarchy. And for the first time since he vanished into the swarm, Zeus must choose. He doesn't act immediately. Instead, he listens. For 3 days, he lets the divide grow, watches as the colony splits not in war, but in ideology. Some want the spiral, some want the tower, and then quietly Zeus Prime returns. He walks ant-leg by ant-leg into the heart of the breakaway camp. No army, no lightning, just presence. And when he arrives, he does something no one expects. He kneels. The rebel ants are confused. They buzz. They posture. One lifts a shard of stone. Zeus doesn't move. Then slowly he offers something. A breadcrumb, perfectly round, golden brown, honey glazed. A gift, not a weapon, not a threat, just food. And in that moment the tension breaks. The shard is lowered. The tower ants pause. And then tentatively they accept the gift. Zeus doesn't gloat. He doesn't lecture. He just turns and leads them back. Together, historians call this the reconciliation of the divide. Folklorists call it the lesson of the crumb. Poets call it the humbling. But among the ants, it's called nothing at all, because to them it was never about power, it was always about belonging. And as the colony reweaves itself into one shape, as tunnels reconnect, and the spiral returns, you realize Zeus has passed his final test, not of strength, but of surrender. He is no longer the god of thunder. He is the god of return. Back in Olympus, the silence has become unbearable. It's the kind that settles in, not out of peace, but from absence. The once rumbling throne, now cold and dusty, the eagle long since flown, the great bronze lightning bolts lined up neatly in a corner, untouched. Apollo has stopped singing. Artemis has started carving spirals into bark. Even Ares, war's bellowing cousin, has been seen crouched beside a line of ants, watching them march like soldiers of a subtler campaign. And Hera is thinking. She doesn't speak of Zeus, not directly, but she lingers more at the edge of Olympus' gaze, turned downward, hand resting on the marble, as if waiting for some soft tremble in the stone. But the tremble doesn't come, because Zeus isn't coming back. You know it now, and so do they, and what's more, he's not gone. He's everywhere. On Earth, the spiral spreads. It's in the stitching of cloaks, in the layout of new marketplaces. Cities begin organizing neighborhoods like shells and snails and stars. Roads curve. Wells are dug along gentle turns. There are fewer walls now, more arches. It's not a decree, it's a feeling. They call it ant wisdom. A man who's never learned to read arranges clay shards in spirals and becomes a teacher. A woman wakes from a fever and begins building tiny bridges between lily pads. A group of thieves leaves stolen goods at spiral altars and walks away. No one is forcing this. There's no doctrine, just resonance. And in the underground city, deeper now than any mortal knows, Zeus continues to guide, but less with instruction and more with example. He moves slower, softer. Ants brush against him and walk on carrying their own wisdom. And then the unexpected happens. A child, not human, not ant, born of the oracle. A queenling. She's larger, more aware. Her shell glows not with gold, but with something deeper, a pulse. A memory of thunder perhaps, or a whisper of lightning turned inward. Zeus watches her hatch. Doesn't intervene, just nods. She stares at him, doesn't kneel, just nods back. And the colony understands there's no need for a king when the future has a shape, and its shape is not a throne, it's a spiral. This queenling, barely an hour old, begins to organize a new kind of order, part instinct, part myth. She places petals near sick ants. She reroutes a tunnel not for efficiency but for light. She teaches through motion. And Zeus, he steps back. He is becoming myth fully now. A story the ants tell without words. A sensation, an inherited rhythm. Hermes, dropping in for his bi-weekly "What is even happening anymore" report, watches the colony in silence. Then he mutters, "I think he built the one thing we never thought he could." You raise an eyebrow. Hermes clarifies, "A legacy without his face on it." And he's right. Because this isn't about Zeus anymore. It's about a way of moving through the world, of seeing connection in smallness, of choosing empathy over spectacle, of giving power away and watching it blossom. You sit back from the telescope. You don't need to look anymore. You feel it, across the world, in the curve of a wave, in the hum of wind through reeds, in the gentle bump of foot on earth. The spiral one is not above, not beyond. He is with. And it is more than enough. The days begin to blend, not in boredom but in rhythm. Down below, in the cool subterranean labyrinth that hums beneath Athens like a forgotten hymn, the colony breathes. It inhales through silence, exhales through movement. And Zeus, if you can still call him that, has become not a leader but a note in that breath. Vital, present, dispersed, no more prime ant, no glowing thorax, just pieces, flashes, memory embedded in thousands of tiny decisions. He has stopped trying to be anything, and in doing so, has become everything. Above, people no longer seek signs from the sky. They watch the ground, they listen to their footsteps. They wait for a line of ants to cross their path, and when it does, they bow slightly, not out of worship, but respect. It's a different kind of reverence. No temples, no prayers, just shared space. A mortal mason now leaves small spiral carvings in the undersides of staircases where no one but ants will ever see. A weaver in Corinth claims she dreams of thread trails and always wakes with the next day's pattern finished in her head. In Thebes, a playwright stages a silent drama called The Humble Storm. The cast, 5 actors, 30 ants, 1 fig. Tickets sell out for a month. Back in the tunnels, the queenling is expanding her reach. Not physically, symbolically. She begins sending out ambassadors, ants with polished shells, gentle manners, and a talent for pattern laying. They don't invade. They visit, they observe, and wherever they go, things improve. Not dramatically, subtly. A plague slows. A bridge long cracked stops creaking. A man finds the strength to forgive someone he hasn't spoken to in years, after finding a spiral of feathers on his doorstep. And the strange thing, no one thanks the ants. They thank each other. Because the spiral way, as people now call it, is not about divine rescue. It's about divine reminder that you can build, that you can carry, that you can pause and rejoin and move again. One day a group of philosophers gathers in Athens, on the very stone steps where Zeus once observed his first fig-rolling ant. They debate politely about the implications of the spiral. Is it religion, asks one. Is it philosophy, says another. Is it a new form of governance, offers a third. The fourth, an elderly woman with hands like gnarled olive branches, simply says, "It is what we do now." That shuts them up for a while. Back on Olympus, the throne room is dusty, yes, but no longer abandoned. The gods have begun to return, not to power, but to presence. They walk among mortals more often now, quietly, some out of curiosity, others perhaps in search of what Zeus found. Even Ares has reportedly taken up gardening. Hermes starts a journal called Smallness Dispatches from the Dirt. It becomes wildly popular in both realms. But Zeus, he never returns, not physically, not as a storm cloud or a bearded flashbang, not as a sudden booming voice from a sky-split temple. He doesn't need to, because now he's in everything. He's the pause before an apology, the last leaf placed on a completed nest, the little decision that shifts a life. And if you ever wonder whether he's still there, just look down. Look for the spiral. It'll be waiting. There's a storm coming, not one of Zeus's, not anymore. This one's all mortal thunderclouds stacked over the Aegean, like dishes left too long, waves practicing their tantrums before making landfall. You watch from Olympus as the city below prepares nails down, shutters, calls in goats, stockpiles bread. But the ants, they do something different. They begin to guide. They move in spirals, yes, but now those spirals point toward higher ground, toward sturdier walls, toward sheltered spaces mortals had forgotten. Spiral trails appear overnight near doorways. Crumbs are placed strategically, leading people away from risk. The oracle ant climbs to a windowsill and curls her body into a tight coil, as if to say, "Stay here. Wait." And people listen. That's the miracle. They listen to ants. The storm hits hard, not apocalyptic, but serious. Roofs lift, streets flood. Lightning dances, not divine this time, just physics doing its angry ballet. But Athens holds, because it was ready. And afterward, the first thing people do is sweep their thresholds gently, laying down petals and seeds, not as offerings, as thanks. You feel it in Olympus like a soft exhale through marble lungs. The old gods sense it too. There's something new in the world, not louder, quieter, but deeply rooted now, like the curl of a vine that won't stop climbing. Zeus would be proud, or maybe he is. You suspect he felt the storm before anyone, probably placed a spiral near someone's chimney or nudged a sparrow to nest higher. He works like that now, soft interventions, and they ripple. Later that week, a child in Delphi finds a small clay disc etched with a spiral and the faintest trace of a lightning bolt. She wears it as a necklace. Her friends ask what it means. She shrugs. "It's for when I forget." "Forget what?" She pauses, then smiles. "That I'm not alone." Elsewhere, a farmer finds his fields arranged into curved rows, not by him. He laughs, lets them be. His harvest improves. In Rhodes, a teacher rearranges her classroom into a spiral. Her students sit calmer. They listen more. One begins writing poems in circles. And in a mountain village, ants rescue a lamb stuck between stones. You think it's exaggeration until a shepherd swears on his own beard and draws the spiral with a stick. The myth spreads. But it's no longer just a myth. It's a practice. The spiral way becomes a quiet movement not to be codified or named officially. It refuses temples, it ignores altars. It simply appears like dew or insight wherever it's needed. You receive word that a temple priest has stepped down not out of disillusionment, but humility. There are too many voices, he says. I'd rather follow the small ones now. Hermes drafts a letter to Zeus, half snark, half sincerity, and drops it into a spiral of olive pits. Whether it's received, unclear, but days later he finds a perfect sesame cake sitting on his sandals. No note, just frosting. And for the first time in eons, Hermes cries, just a little. Back underground, the Queenling now leads. Her reign is not flashy. She teaches new ants to pause before moving, to feel the ground, to watch the sky not for threats, but for mirrors. And beneath her the colony breathes on. Zeus is no longer visible. No single thorax glows. No ant lingers longer than it needs to. But you feel him in the stillness. You feel him in the way the colony handles conflict now, with patience, with food, with spirals of conversation traced in seed dust. And you finally understand he never meant to stay Zeus. He meant to plant him. It begins with a whisper, like all important things do, not in Olympus, not in Delphi, but in a tiny fishing village where no one important lives and no one expects miracles. An old man, barefoot and salt-haired, wakes to find a spiral of smooth stones on the shoreline. He smiles. He's seen it before. He walks back into his cottage and brings out a story, not a scroll, not a song, just a story, told over bread. And that's how it begins. The remembrance. Because the world is shifting again, not toward revolution or revelation, but toward recollection. They're remembering why the spiral mattered, why a god chose the smallest shape. And the stories come back all at once. Zeus in the soil, the oracle ant at the edge of dreams, the honey drop that became a sacrament. Children begin carving spirals in places no one tells them to, on driftwood, in snow and fogged windows. One girl makes them with her breath on glass and says, "That's for later." So I remember to listen. And what's remarkable, no one tells them to stop. You wander Olympus with that feeling you can't quite name, nostalgia braided with reverence. The palace halls, once echo chambers of ego and clamor, are still now. The gods have grown quieter, not powerless, just thoughtful. Hera has taken to keeping a garden. Apollo has written 3 poems and refused to publish them. Ares leaves out breadcrumbs, and Hephaestus has invented a new kind of hinge, shaped like a spiral, of course, that creaks only in gratitude. You see it all, but you don't report it, you just observe. Because now even you understand this is not a story to control, it's a story to carry. One morning an acolyte arrives at the temple of Athena holding a piece of wax. On it, etched delicately, is a single spiral, no signature, no name. She says, "I think this was meant for you." Athena, curious despite herself, takes it, sits with it, watches it melt in her palm, and says nothing. She doesn't need to. That evening the stars shimmer in a pattern mortals swear they've never seen, one great spiral, slow and subtle, reaching toward the edge of the sky. Astronomers are baffled, children are delighted, philosophers are humbled, and down on earth, in a shadowed place behind a bakery, an ant drags a single sesame seed into a tiny chamber lined with silk and dust and memory. In that chamber is a tiny sculpture, half grain, half clay. It is a spiral, and it is enough. You realize something as you watch this is the kind of immortality that doesn't need thunder. It doesn't demand temples or prayers. It's behavioral, it's replicable, it's quietly viral, and it lives longer than any statue ever could, because it lives in what people do when no one's watching. Zeus understood that finally, and gave himself away, everywhere. The colony, once a miracle of motion, has become a monument to memory, not frozen, not still, just settled. You watch from Olympus as they move not with urgency, but grace. Tunnels no longer expand, they refine. Entrances are reshaped for elegance, chambers swept with ritual care. Every movement is precise, purposeful, like dancers who've long since memorized their steps, and now perform not to impress, but to belong. The Queenling, fully grown now, leads not with power, but with pattern. She rarely emerges, and when she does, it is never alone. She's always accompanied by 2 or 3 older ants, mentors perhaps, or memories. You can't tell which anymore. There's something deeply peaceful about it. And in that peace, a question starts to form, not in the colony, not in Olympus, in the world. It begins quietly in places where stories are still told out loud. Where did Zeus go? Not the thunder god, not the statue, the small one, the spiral one, and no one agrees. Some say he still lives in the colony, invisible but felt. Some say he diffused into nature itself, that every bird's tilt of the head, every cat's lingering pause before leaping, carries a shard of his awareness. Others believe he passed into us, not as possession, not as inspiration, just permission to be small, to listen, to rebuild. And for the first time in recorded myth, the absence of a god brings more comfort than fear. People find spirals in unexpected places, tree rings, cloud shapes, the swirl of tea leaves at the bottom of a chipped cup, and they smile not because they believe in divine intervention, but because they believe in attention, the act of noticing. One boy begins sketching spiral mazes in the dust, says he dreams of ants that whisper in riddles. His sister braids her hair in loops, calls it the language of calm. In a distant city, a cartographer redesigns the entire market district to reflect spiral walkways. Theft drops, foot traffic doubles. Arguments go soft. He credits a dream and a breadcrumb, and somewhere, though you don't see it, Zeus stirs, not from slumber, from integration, because he is now part of the pattern. Not its source, but its story, the lesson tucked inside the curve. And Olympus, they've come to accept it. The gods no longer wait for Zeus to return. They set an extra cup at the table, yes, but they've stopped expecting thunder. Instead, they find him in echoes. Athena writes policies that breathe. Poseidon listens more than he lectures. Even Dionysus, blessed chaos itself, has begun organizing his festivals around pauses, actual pauses, breathing space, time to feel, and you find yourself walking more slowly, noticing more, you speak less, you observe ants without reaching for metaphor, because that's the final gift Zeus gave the world, not control, not spectacle, not power, perspective. He didn't come down to teach, he came down to understand. And by becoming small, he became true. A reminder that even the loudest gods must learn to whisper, that even the mightiest stories need room to end, or at least to change shape. And one day, in a quiet patch of olive grove where no one ever seems to be looking, a spiral of pebbles appears. It doesn't glow, it doesn't sing, it doesn't ask for anything. It just is. And it is enough. You're standing at the edge of it all now, not a cliff, not a battlefield, something quieter, softer. A point in the story where movement becomes reflection, where the pace of the tale begins to hush, as if even the narrative itself is ready to rest. Below, the colony moves in slow spirals like breath in a dream. The Queenling no longer issues commands, she simply exists, and the ants follow. Not out of duty, but understanding. They remember, and so do you. The world does too. In Athens, an architect completes a spiral amphitheater built not for speeches, but for silence. People gather there at dusk. They don't talk, they just sit. Watch the ants cross the stage like quiet actors playing out the oldest role of all persistence. In Thebes, a teacher introduces a new subject, smallness. It's about detail, attention, patience. The final exam, to follow an ant for an hour and learn something true. The spiral's everywhere now, but never loud. It shows up on prayer beads, in dance steps, in the quiet routines of bakers who no longer look at recipes but follow the feeling of the dough. They don't say it's divine, they just know. Zeus, in whatever form remains of him, has let go entirely. He's not an ant anymore. He's not even the spiral one. He's myth. He's metaphor. He's method. He's the instinct to help without asking why. The pause before anger, the gentle correction of a misstep without shame. A shape repeated across time and soil. And what about Olympus? You ask yourself that. You climb the steps sometimes, though no one guards them now. The gates are open. The halls echo less. The gods, what's left of them, sit together not as rulers but as witnesses. Occasionally one leans over and draws a spiral in the dust with a fingertip. No one speaks of Zeus. They speak of ants, of bridges, of patience. Because when you name a god too often, you risk making him small again. And Zeus, he was never meant to stay that size, just to try it. And in doing so, he planted something bigger than he ever was when he held the sky in his fist. The Queenling dies one night quietly, as all queens do. The colony mourns without wailing. They leave her in a chamber lined with flower petals and almond crumbs. They seal it gently. The tunnel never reopens. A new Queenling rises, and in her first act, she rebuilds an old chamber. It holds nothing, just a spiral, etched in stone. And you feel your eyelids growing heavier now, like the story itself is winding down. The thunder has long since passed. The lightning sleeps, and in the hush that follows something lingers, not a roar, not a prophecy, just the faintest impression of footsteps in dust, the shape of a god who chose to walk instead of fly, and who never needed a temple, only a trail. And now let it settle. Let the story dissolve like sugar in warm tea, leaving behind nothing sharp or loud, just a gentle sweetness curling behind your thoughts. Picture the tunnels, deep, quiet, cool. No urgency, no glory, just the soft shuffle of legs and earth and purpose. The weightless nobility of creatures that carry far more than they appear capable of. The kind of strength that doesn't flex but continues. Let your breath slow. You don't have to chase the ending. It's already arrived. Imagine the spiral not as a symbol but a feeling, something you return to gently, again and again. A path not toward a destination, but toward remembering who you were, what you noticed, what you let go. You don't need thunder to be powerful. You don't need wings to move mountains. Sometimes you just need to move one crumb, and then another, and then pause. Let the night take its turn. Let your thoughts chafen like earth after rain. There's nothing left to chase here. No kings, no gods. Just rhythm, pattern, peace. Let the weight of your limbs sink into the bed beneath you. Let the world feel far away and impossibly safe. Know that the smallest things might be watching you with quiet love. And if in your dreams you see a tiny figure carrying something too large for it, don't help. Just watch. It's doing exactly what it was made to do. End of script. Sweet dreams.